every Saturday afternoon, around about 2 o'clock, I'd hop on the subway over and about 5 stops from here, either at the Woodbine station or the Coxwell station, with my bass in hand, and take the subway over to Broadview, go up onto the street, stop in at the pool room that used to be next door to the Black Swan, get myself a cappuccino, and get ready to start a great afternoon of music. This is how I used to get over to the Swan. I haven't been on the subway in a long time. This is the Black Swan, and this is where we formed the Kendall Wall Band back in 1983. It was owned by different people at the time, but I knew two guys, Rick Bice and Danny Narduzzi, were the manager of the place, and I'd gone back with those guys from the 70s when they used to manage the El Macombo. I used to play there a lot. And they wanted to do a Saturday afternoon blues matinee. I was kind of floundering at the time. I was sort of, I guess, looking back on it now, it was a period of me reinventing myself. I just left Downchild, and I was really, I didn't know where I was going to go. I thought, I've been in the most popular, best-known Canadian blues band, and now I'm not anymore. In some ways, I think I thought my playing career was over. I didn't have a band. Had to put a band together. So I immediately went to my old friend Cash Wall, drummer. I meant we had a drummer and a bass player, and since the format was going to be essentially a jam session anyway, we didn't really need a front man. We didn't need a singer. All we needed was 4 guys. So I'm thinking guitar, harmonica. At the time I was doing some work with Richard Smythe, so by process of elimination, Richard became the guitar player.
I was intrigued because I thought it was a way for me to stay in touch with my roots. You know, I started out playing blues, and I did a lot of other things too, but that's where I was smitten, if you will. So I saw it as a way of just staying in touch with who I was, and I thought that was kind of important, and I'm glad I did it.
Cash and I had a band. We were in a band called Dollars, and this harmonica player, Bob Adams, also known as Cadillac Eddie, he used to come out and sit in with us, and we really liked him, and we liked the way he played. So that became the band. We needed a name. What are we going to call it? Cash thought it should be called the Wall Kendall Band, but I said, you know, Kendall Wall sort of rings a little bit better. We called it a blues matinee. We didn't really tag it as a jam, but when we would run into musicians who we liked to play with, we would invite them down to sit in. Well, so of course, that meant that some days it would be great. Some really good players would show up, and other days it wouldn't be so great. You know, it was kind of organized chaos where it could be magic or it could just be a total mess. we knew people would be sitting in, so essentially we were going to be a backup band, and we figured any singing that needed to be done, we could handle it ourselves. So Cash and I started to develop a repertoire of vocal songs. We started doing the matinee here, and it stunk. I mean, the band wasn't very good, and not very many people were coming out. The only way I thought I could make the band better was to start playing more than one day a week. Cash didn't want to do that. I mean, he wanted out of the music business. His floor tom was an end table. You know, it had a lamp on it at home. And it took a lot to get him to bring that floor tom from his living room to the gig. Like, he wanted to do the gig with a drum kit without a floor tom. And I kept saying to him, no, you gotta, that's not a full drum kit. You gotta get the floor tom. Go out and buy another end table for that lamp. The drums gotta come to the gig.
I think the coolest thing about Charlie was that he was a real blues fan and a real blues drummer. As unschooled as he was totally into playing it the way he heard the records. So he wasn't a rock drummer who learned to play blues in order to get gigs, or he wasn't a jazz drummer who played blues, you know, as some sort of entry level into jazz. He was a guy who listened to Howlin' Wolf records, and when you asked him to play a song, he would play it like S.P. Leary or whoever else was on the record. So he had a really authentic sound. He once bragged that he had never actually practiced the drums. He'd only played them on gigs and rehearsed with them. And I think that's true. Given that, he was fantastic.
He was really resistant. He didn't want to play any more than Saturday afternoon. He didn't want to jeopardize what he had. His home life was good, and he knew what being in a band was like and how it could wreck personal stuff. And I kept saying to him, it's not going to be that much, you know, like just the odd gig other than the Swan, just so we can be a good band. Oh, okay. So that started us becoming into more of a real band, because we started taking other gigs. Well, starting to take these other gigs posed a problem, because Richard wasn't always available.
I was trying to get myself to be as versatile as possible, because at that time there was lots of work going on in Toronto, and I didn't want to limit myself to just playing in blues bands. So I would play the matinee here, which was booked until 6:30, but it almost always went till 7 at least. And then I would have to, after lots of libation going on in this place, I would have to put a three-piece suit on, go up to some society gig, and read charts all night. And let me tell you, it was, some nights were very challenging that way.
We started using sub guitar players for Richard and occasionally subs for the harmonica player, and that was defeating the purpose of playing other gigs to make our band better. A few different guitarists in the Kendall Wall Band, starting with, of course, Richard Smythe. After Richard, there would be Mike McKenna. Don't have any pictures of when Mike was in the band. He wasn't in the band very long. And then Teddy Leonard. And when Teddy left, Kevin Higgins became our guitarist. Chris Burgess, the last guitarist in the Kendall Wall Band. He was in the last period of the band, still around, still a really good guitar player.
Well, I was about 23, 24 when I started, and Did it for 3 or 4 seasons, I think. And yeah, it was great. You know, we got to play with all these guys that were playing at Albert's Hall usually that week. All different guys like Luther Guitar, Junior Johnson, Snooky Pryor, Matt Guitar, Murphy's, Honey Boy Edwards, guys, you know, that were in Muddy Waters band. And I feel really lucky I got to learn from those guys.
So eventually, Bob Adams became really unavailable. He got a night job. He couldn't play any other gigs. And I met Jeff Baker along the way. We'd invited him to come and sit in on a Saturday afternoon, and he was really good harmonica player.
He asked me if I wanted to come in and sit in with the band on a Saturday, you know, and I said, yeah, sure, that'd be great, you know. So I went down and checked it out, and they were really happening, and it sounded great. And I thought, wow, these guys are like, this is a real deal. These guys are a real blues band, you know. So I did that a few more times, and it really wasn't working out with their original harmonica player. So they eventually asked me to join the band full time.
I was living in Victoria, BC, and Jeff Baker came to town with his band, and I remember just thinking, this guy sounds as good as the records that I love, you know, Little Walter, Junior Wells, you know, all these great harmonica players, James Cotton. I'm like, this guy's doing it. He's got the tone, all the harp moves. It just fits right in the band. He was always just really, really solid, tasteful player, you know, like you hear him and you just keep going over and over. That's the right thing to do there. That's the right thing to do there. That's appropriate. That works.
The first time I sat in with the band, because I was playing with Morgan Davis and we were doing a weekend here and my stuff was already set up, and so that Saturday afternoon I knew you guys were here because I knew Richard from before and I knew he was in this band, and it was the second set when all the jammers were coming in. So I basically just walked on up and I said, "Can I play?" He said, "Yeah." He didn't ask my name or anything, so I just sat down and I at my gear, and then we did 3 or 4 songs, and then you turned around to, you know, a couple of the other guys in the band, the jammers. You went, "You can go, you can go, you can go." Then you looked at me and you said, "You can stay."
Not a big blues town, but we don't have enough places to really keep the blues alive in a number of places. There's usually one place where it's really focused. For a while it was Albert's Hall, but for a while it was the Black Swan, and it was the matinee that Gary Kendall and Cash Wall had when they joined up and they had that Kendall Wall Band, and their matinee on Saturdays was where the blues happened in Toronto in the afternoon on Saturday. You could count on it. And these guys were pretty serious about the blues, and that is that they had listened to it all their lives. They didn't just start playing blues because they were rock musicians. They always played blues.
The things you used to say to me, I thought that we would never part. Yes, I love you. I just love you. I just love you. Why did you break my heart?
It didn't take off until Nick came to me one day and he said, "This is going nowhere." He said, "We got to add something." I thought he was going to fire me, but he said, "We got to add something to Saturday afternoon to make it better. If I give you more money, I want you to bring in a special guest." And that's when it took off. We started bringing in special guests, and that bumped it up a little bit, and then, lo and behold, the kind people over at Albert's Hall locked into it.
And so we started to develop a following. We were sort of the the first club or the first band to really focus on jamming and getting special guests in the afternoon. We would play an opening set, and then we would have a special guest sit in for the third set. And you know, it would be a local musician who was very popular, like John Dickey or Donnie Walsh from Downchild would be a guest. Morgan Davis, all kinds of great musicians would come in and sit in and play with the band. We would back them up. It was a format that we kind of pioneered. And the third set would be the chance for up-and-coming musicians, blues musicians, and to be able to get up and play with a professional band and sit in and get a feel for what it's like to play in a real band, in a live audience situation.
Our crowds were starting to build. It was getting better. It was starting to be a respectable number of people in here. Donna McCollum came by one day, and Donna was the booker at Albert's Hall. And at that time, Albert's Hall was the A-room. Not very many local blues musicians ever got a gig there, but all of the touring acts did, and they came in for a week. She dropped in one Saturday afternoon and said, "Hey, this is kind of happening here, you know, maybe I could get some of the people that are playing at our club to do this guest spot for you." And I mean, that would never happen today. I mean, just that whole conflict of interest, competition, nobody would ever do you a favor like that. So I was thrilled. "Sure, can you make it happen?" "Yeah, I can make it happen. I got Marcia Ball coming in like in 2 weeks, and I'll get in touch with her and see if she wants to come by and be your special guest." She started setting us up with the touring people that played at Albert's Hall, and we had Eddie Clearwater, A.C. Reed, Chubby Carrier, Philip Guy, Luther Guitar Jr. Johnson, Pinetop Perkins, Jerry Portnoy. The list goes on. And when we couldn't get an Albert's Hall touring guest, then we would bring in the best of what we had in Southern Ontario. Dutch Mason would, when he was coming through. So we had this incredible lineup of special guests.
Caledonia, Caledonia, now what make you think it's so hard? I love her just the same. I love Caledonia, Caledonia is the name. Here we go. The Big Bang Show, Dove on the tank, show battle, on the show, on the tank, show battle, on the tank, show battle. Even if it is too many to shoot, show battle, on the tank, show battle, on the tank, show battle. Shoot even if it is too many. Shoot up, shoot up, shoot up, shoot battle, on the tank, show battle, on the tank, show battle, on the tank, show battle. Even if it is too many to shoot, show battle, on the tank, show battle, on the tank, show battle. Shoot it up, shoot it up, shoot it up, shoot it up.
It was a great matinee. It was really popular. The bar had, really good numbers, and as a result, we could get good guests. Sometimes we had local guests, but quite often when guests came through from U.S. guests, particularly from Chicago and places like that, they would pick up the matinee to make a little bit of extra money, and as a result, I and everyone else in the band got to play with lots of great people. Walter Wolfman Washington, of course Dutch Mason was through many times. I'm trying to think of some of the other guys. I think Lazy Lester came by once. A lot of people that were playing in town, they would come by and they would be the guest, and it's always fantastic. It was great, and so I got to play with all of those people.
That was a great thing, that you could play at night, but then you could come and play the Swan in the afternoon. And that was the thing about all of us. We all basically had our gigs at night, but we could come and do a guest spot at the Swan, so that was really a wonderful situation.
They get blues artists from out of town, that were coming in and playing Friday and Saturday night, or maybe all week at a club. And of course they didn't do a matinee, so they would come over and play the matinee with Kendall Wall, and it was great times, man. Just the place was packed, had a great time.
we all had to jam, especially when we were that young. Like, you do a few gigs, and honestly for me, I was playing a lot of rock and roll at that time with my original band, the Phantoms. So I was still learning about the blues, like how to just sit in and, you know, and guys like Jeff just always seem to know the right degree, Jeff Baker on harp, like to play. I was kind of a bit jumpy and a bit over the top, and playing with Gary Kendall and Cash Wall, and I kind of learned to listen a little more closely and to settle down my energy, my nervous energy, and just play a part and create a band sound, you know, on the spot, which I had learned to create a band sound with my rock band because we practiced. But the beautiful thing about learning how to play blues is you can create a band sound right away with total strangers if you're all on the same page and got your ears wide open. So I really learned a lot playing with those guys. And back then, we just played every opportunity we could. That Saturday afternoon jam, we put in our 10,000 hours like there. Like, and that's what it takes to get good at anything, I hear, is 10,000 hours. And then you're doing okay. Then you can play.
I always remember the Saturday matinees just being a great time because they had such a loyal following, and it was like a party, like a rent party or something every Saturday afternoon, you know. And they were a great band. They were fun to play with, and just the atmosphere in the Black Swan was always great. I had a lot of great times there. Aside from the horrendous hum from the bad wiring on the stage, you know, maybe my only complaint, you know, I think I got electrocuted a couple of times in there, but the music was always great fun, and great guys. We had a ball. Blue Willow, Lorraine and Dawn. Lorraine used to come when Lorraine was just starting out. Lorraine, of course, started as a classical piano player, very similar to Jane Vasey from the Downchild Blues Band. Started out a classical trained musician, discovered the blues and dove into the blues all hands and feet. But Lorraine was amazing because Lorraine would bring her piano. We didn't have a piano in the band, and Lorraine would bring her piano in for the jam portion of the afternoons, which was great.
Well, my memories of the Saturday Jam, the Black Swan, are very fond memories. And I was a classically trained piano player, as you know. And with your kind assistance, you were the person that helped me to learn to improvise. By standing there behind me, telling me which chord we were playing, because I could read concertos, but I couldn't play by ear.
It's Ralph McDonald. Ralph is the guy who introduced me to Jeff Baker. and started that ball rolling. So we used a lot of various subs, and Ralph was one of Richard's subs.
Place to come on Saturday afternoon in Toronto if you were into blues music. It was, I remember sometimes trying to come in and the place would be so full that it was very hard to navigate. And what we would also try to do is when your blues jams went here, we would also try to start a little early to hang on to your crowd because you guys had such good crowds here. So I always used to tell the guys, don't wait till 9:30, let's get going now. You know, we got a house full of people, let's try to hang on. But it was the joint. I mean, this was the place to come. And you know, like anybody who was into blues at all at that point in time knew that.
It's a love going up to that room, man, because you know, Cash Wall and Gary were good friends, and you know, they were both, you know, played with Downchild and stuff like that, and that was before I was in Downchild, so for me to play with them was a, you know, a real pleasure and a learning experience and stuff like that, and you know, it was one of those rooms back in those days where it just had the vibe, you know. It had a great feeling, the blues was happening in that room. It was this kind of weird room because it was a long, narrow room, you know, but it was just a wonderful experience.
Well, when I first played with Gary and Cash at the Black Swan, it was, you know, we knew each other, but we hardly ever played together. Came in there, and it was just like family. Like they created this big sort of, it was like party family feeling that was just wonderful. You know, I felt right at home playing with those guys. We had so much fun. And Gary and Cash had a real communication, you know, because we were always flying by the seat of our pants. You know, they don't really know my songs yet, but they're just going with it, you know, and the energy is so positive.
The other thing that stands out in my mind, if I was going to remember Kendall Wall, was the rhythm section between you and Cash. Was one of those type of rhythm sections that you don't get to hear that often, because it's one of those things where it's two people who have worked together in lots of time, over a period of time. And I used to tell people, well, my brother came one time to hear you guys play, and he said that he had heard about tenors. He thought you were one of the best bass players he'd heard in Toronto. And one of the things that I had said was playing with Kendall Wall, with Gary and Cash, was it's like a great old rocking chair. It's just like it's got a groove that just won't quit, and you don't want to stop. And it feels like it's been rocked in a few times, and it was well worn, but man, it just moved you. It was very real and very, very pleasurable to play, that's for sure.
Gary Portnoy was our special guest. He was a harmonica player for the Muddy Waters Band for years and years. He was one of my favorite harmonica players, and he showed up and played the second set with the band, and I got to sit out front and watch him play for my amplifier.
And kind of funny that later on, you know, Gary and I ended up playing again together in Downchild and stuff like that. But he always had great guests. It's hard to maintain that, and Gary knew how to do it. You got to keep it fresh all the time and changing it, and that's what Gary was smart enough to do. He did that, bringing in lots of great guests and you know, talent from right across Canada. So it was a great time for me, and I remember it fondly.
I remember we were lined up down the stairs out the door.
Yeah.
On Saturday afternoon.
I mean, we eventually had to put an admission charge on for crowd control.
That's right.
And we used to give out,
Your little cards.
Yeah, because we used to promote by a mailing list.
That's right.
So anybody who signed up for the mailing list, we'd give them a card.
You were good in that department.
And they got in for free. But that meant those people with those cards, they kind of felt special, like they were VIP. Everybody else had to pay $5.
It worked.
They got in for nothing, and they would come almost every week with their little card, you know. We had a small amount of money to offer them. I think we offered them $100, and they only had to play for half an hour. None of them ever played a half an hour. They all played at least an hour. The money didn't mean anything to them. I mean, anybody can use an extra 100 in their pocket, but what I found out from those blues musicians is they just wanted to play, and it was Saturday afternoon. They didn't really have anything to do. What better thing to do? So it got so organized that I used to look at the Alberts Hall lineup, and and after Donna left Alberts Hall, Yvonne Matzel, they would connect me with the booking agents for the different acts. I would get in touch and we would work it out in advance. So we would be able to advertise who our special guests were going to be months in advance. And then it really took off, because people would come in here and just jam this place to see us playing with somebody like Carrie Bell on a Saturday afternoon. And then probably, maybe not 50% of our audience, but a good 25 to 30% of our audience would go to Alberts Hall on Saturday night to catch their Saturday night show.
I do remember you coming in particular, and I think at that time it was more to do with your band getting booked at Alberts Hall. And then, doing some nights then, and then we worked out this compromise. I don't think this would happen anymore. Every seat counts in a venue, and the threat of maybe the people wouldn't come to the show if they saw them in the afternoon. Exactly. Now would be the case, but I know it didn't hurt. In fact, it was a really pleasant afternoon because I used to come to some of those.
It just grew into a really nice scene. The jam portion got better because the good local musicians knew what was happening, so they started coming out. And at the same time, we were developing a lot of the younger people that were coming out every week that we were getting up to play with us in the jam.
I've got a sweet little angel, and I love the way she spread her wings. I've got a sweet little angel, and I love the way she spread her wings.
Ron Headland, wearing his Black Swan t-shirt. Ron was an amazing drummer, keyboard player, piano and organ, and songwriter and singer. And he used to play drums and keyboards at the same time, like on occasion. And he was phenomenal, really talented, amazing talented guy, originally from Norfolk, Virginia.
A lot of musicians that wanted to play in a band but didn't have one together would be able to come to the Black Swan and sit in with us and work on their playing style with other musicians. And because of that, there's a few musicians in Toronto now that started out just sitting in with the band and have progressed to professional musicians in their own right. And so I think that is kind of our legacy.
I'm pretty special when I would go to that jam, because what you guys would do is you'd always set it up so that I would get to play with the best players, which was Kendall Wall. I felt very protected and cared for in this Kendall Wall setting, because you guys all were like sort of big brothers, right?
Sister.
Yeah, that's how it felt to me too.
He was pretty young when we met Guitar Mike. He was just out of high school. We used to bring him in as a guest.
Well, first of all, I think Kendall Wall Blues Band was not just a performing band, but they were an institution in helping a lot of other local artists come up and find their own place. The jams were, I think, the best run jams I'd ever been to before or since. And the generosity of all the players in that band was always tremendous. Gary Kendall especially got me really introduced to Toronto more than anybody else after I sort of went out on my own after playing with King Biscuit Boy for so many years.
And because every time you play there, it's like this is the first time. It's like so enjoyable. Like
You know how you have like favorite days or favorite gigs? Well, every one of those gigs were favorite to me. Like, every one of them were favorite. I don't have a favorite. They were all good.
Very early shot of Harrison Kennedy. He used to guest with us here. A.C. Reed would come over and guest with us. Phil Guy, Buddy Guy's brother. Another shot of Carrie Bell right there. And Tony Flame. Phil Guy we used to back up at Albert's Hall. We backed Phil up a few times. Morgan Davis and Al Lerman. Al Lerman from Fathead, and of course the great Morgan Davis. They used to do a duo night here, just the two of them.
There was a certain promise that you felt being part of that community, that there was a chance for us to really make a mark for ourselves musically.
Carrie Bell. Carrie was used to come over here as a special guest all the time. There was that one day that Carrie was here, the place would always be packed. By this time, the matinees had really become a happening place. One day the place was rocking so much, Carrie got down off the stage and was coming through the crowd here playing his harmonica, and some woman got and jumped right up on his back. He just carried her along till she finally had enough and got off.
Too, it was like sometimes you go to jams and there'd be jam hosts that really want to hog the stage, or there was some ego thing getting in the way of the music. And with Gary Kendall and the Kendall Wall Blues Band, there was never any of that. It was just like, the joy of the blues. Let's play.
We played that up because folks said he's feeling all right. It is a rockin' little boogie we played each time to see. The rockin' little boogie we played each time to see.
It meant a lot to me, and it was a social interaction going on, because we would socialize together. It wasn't just about the music, but it was a really comfortable place to come and play with my buddies, who were always very supportive of what I did. It was special. There was something special about that whole chemistry thing.
I remember one day standing on the bandstand when it was going pretty good, and just saying to myself, like, you got to remember this, because this is a really good period. Take care of them, make them feel welcome. The crowd made them feel welcome, and then they got up in the bandstand, and the band showed them respect as well. So they loved it here, and once they did it once, they always wanted to come back and do it again. And for the band, we ended up being hired at other places to back some of those people up. Like, we ended up playing at Albert's Hall, backing up Snooky Pryor, Cash McCall, Phil Guy, a lot of people that had been our guests here, Luther Guitar Jr. Johnson.
I was blessed to see these guys perform live.
Yeah.
It was absolutely amazing.
It was a good time.
All right, keep that hand clapping going. I want them to hear you all the way up there on the 3rd floor. You can make a little more noise. Let's hear it, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cash McCall.
back up Snooky on several occasions, some big venues, and had a great time. He was like one of our favorite guests and friends of the band kind of thing, and we got to play Pop the Gator in Kitchener, and we got to play Albert's Hall in Toronto.
This is a shot because we used to actually work over a number of years. We were sort of Snooky Pryor's backup band in this area, so we actually got a promo shot done of us with Snooky.
I'm gonna put your boogie woogie. I'm gonna put your boogie woogie down. Take me all night long.
Luther's band couldn't get across the border. Well, so we got the call here. Just as we were wrapping up the Blues Matinee, I get the phone call. You know, Luther Guitars Junior Johnson needs a bass player and a drummer to back him up tonight at the Bermuda Onion. He walks in and he sees us. And of course he lights up right away. You know, thank God it's these guys. I know that's what he's thinking. These guys, at least I know I got a band that can play my stuff. So it's me and Cash standing there. And he goes, "Where's your harmonica player at?" And we went, "Well, they only asked for us." He said, "I'll fix that." So we got on the phone and we managed to get Jeff in.
Just in case we both were wrong. You can give up your man. But it don't make sense, baby, to take a chance before we think. What will we do later on? What kind of life would we have just in case we both were wrong?
Lovey Lee, another member of the Muddy Waters band, piano player, Lovey. We backed him up at a club called Blues and Cues.
You said I want a Cadillac, but you intend on a dinner. You said thanks for the snack. I let you live my penthouse, but you called it a shack. I gave you 7 children, and now you want to give up.
There was something about Eddie Kirkland, like he was a real traditional guitar player, but he sort of had this reputation of his guitars always being out of tune. And I go see him with his own band, and I couldn't understand why somebody wasn't tuning his guitars. So we had a chance one time with the Kendall Wall Band to back him up. And between shows, Eddie wouldn't go to the dressing room. He had a van with a TV in it, and Eddie headed out to the van. So as soon as Eddie, like we did a sound check, Eddie went to the van. He must have had 5 guitars. I tuned them all. I got the tuner out. I tuned them all, so they're all in perfect tune. Eddie comes back, the first set, it was incredible. Like, I'd never heard him sound as good, and he was getting into it. He liked the band, you know, like he was really working off it. And he did some stuff that I'd never seen. He played harmonica. I'd never seen him play harmonica. He was a really good harmonica player. Like, he put on a show that was way above any other time I'd ever seen him. Well, we'd had the band for about 5 years, and by then it was a real band. You know, the Kendall Wall Blues Band. We'd come quite a ways from our original beginnings here, hosting a jam. You know, now we were a band that brought in special guests. We had sort of a show of our own. We were branching outside of the Swan, and the only way I could see of taking another step was to become a recording act, but nobody was going to give us a record deal. That was not going to happen. I was really paying attention to the punk music scene and the new wave scene of the 80s, and how those bands couldn't care less about getting a record deal. They put out stuff of their own, and however they felt like doing it, whether it was doing cassette or if they could actually press vinyl, they were just doing it. The music didn't really appeal to me too much, but their guerrilla way of doing things did. And so I sort of thought, you know, all of these young bands are just doing it. They're not waiting around for somebody to come and take them under their wing. They're just recording and doing it. So I think we should do that.
Well, Gary is just a good businessman. You know, he's well organized, and I appreciate those things. You know, this business is something else, you know. And man, if you can keep your eye on the ball with everything that's going on, that's saying something. Because, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've known in this business that were good, but they weren't good enough with all the stuff that happens. It just gets in their head. It's not their fault, man.
So we thought, you know, well, let's do a recording and we'll see where it goes. And once we get it done, if we can, we'll send it to some record companies and just to see. But if nothing really comes of that, we'll do a cassette release. We'll put out a cassette. We didn't have any money, so that's how we did it. Like anytime Cash and I had an extra $100 each, which meant we had $200, we'd go to the studio.
Studio that was kind of, I don't know, run on kerosene or something. It was really a fly-by-night kind of operation, it seemed to me. And but we barreled on through and we got something. I remember that.
So in our recording sessions, some of the guitar was Richard, who was still officially the guitar player, and the other guitar parts were done by Teddy Leonard, who was one of Richard's subs.
I started playing with Kendall Wall and started doing the record. I had been in Morgan Davis's band, and I played a bunch with him, and I played with Gary in another band, Kenny Brown and the Pervaders. And we, again, Gary and Cash decided they would do a record, and asked me to play on a couple of cuts. And I was mostly Richard Smythe's fill-in. When Richard couldn't make it, I would fill in for him. Then, when they started recording, there were certain songs they wanted Richard on, certain songs they wanted me on. And that's when we went up to Motet and started recording.
We were trying to write songs, and we also knew that when we recorded, we wanted to record more than the four of us. We wanted to have a bigger band in the studio. We wanted to use keyboards. We wanted to maybe add horns, you know, maybe take advantage of overdubs, stuff like that. Well, we were only 16 tracks, so there wasn't a lot we could do. But we wanted to sort of go in a new direction. We'd been playing real traditional blues.
So I was pretty excited, you know, to see what the process was like and to hear myself back on tape, which I'd never heard before. And I'm playing along, hear myself playing through the headphones, and it sounded great. And it was like, wow, this is fantastic, you know, it sounds great. And it was really motivating in that respect.
I was usually the guy that came up with the not bluesy parts. So if I remember correctly, there's probably a bridge or two that I came up with, or you know, we went into halftime at some point, things like that, you know, that wouldn't normally be done in your ordinary blues band.
Well, you know what? I'm kind of like the Rolling Stones piano players. You know, they're never really part of the band, but they're on pretty well every song. You know, Nicky Hopkins and you know, Billy Preston, and now they got a full-time guy who's on the records. But you know, in those days there was always the mystery piano players, but they were always so good.
I remember it quite well at Motet Music. The people that owned the studio, I think a husband and wife team, they didn't know much about blues. They'd mostly been doing classical music, as the name would suggest, a motet. And I remember particularly once on this song, Just One More Time. There's a pretty scary guitar riff that starts it off, real Ike Turner stuff. And when I played it, I remember looking out in the control room and the engineer looking to his wife like, what was that? Is it supposed to sound like that? That's what I told him. Yeah, it's supposed to sound like that.
We didn't want to be pigeonholed as just a blues band. We wanted to have a little bit of a variety of music there, because we weren't just a blues band. We were, we played, music in that vein, but we definitely tried to stretch out a little bit in our recordings and in our songwriting.
You hear some pop influences on that record.
Yeah.
Some of the 80s stuff that was going around that was not necessarily blues oriented. There's some of that on that record, which was, I was surprised as to how many different musical bases it touches.
The actual recording process was full of problems. First off, the guy engineer who owned the studio didn't have any clue about blues or what we were trying to do, how to get the sound. He was experimenting himself with his studio.
I mean, it worked out okay, I guess, but I just didn't like the whole studio experience very much. I don't think it was good for any of us, particularly. It's great that the stuff is around now, but in those days we just didn't know enough about finding a good producer, I don't think, to end up with a good product.
It was difficult, but we ended up recording that music, and then the mixing process came once we had everything down, and then it got really difficult to mix at Motet Music. We just couldn't get it to sound any good at all.
We went on tape, and we did it with engineers who weren't experienced with blues, but I think they did their best. And Gary only knows how to do something one way, and that's the right way. When he puts a band together, when he rehearses, whenever he writes a tune, he puts all of himself into it, and that's what he did with this one.
We went in and played what we played. Like, we didn't really try to polish any, change anything. What we did at the Swan, how we played here, and we sort of took it in the studio the same way. We said, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's go. It wasn't really rearranged that much or rehearsed that much. That's what I like, very spontaneous. We kind of just took what we were doing, or what I was doing, playing with you guys, just took it right in the studio. Okay, let's record it, let's do it. And so it had that sort of natural, off the cuff sort of thing.
We came out with what I would classify as an inferior product. No record company was going to pick it up. We did manufacture it into a cassette, and it worked more as a demo to get gigs. We sold a few at our gigs and things like that, but it was hard, we weren't going to get any radio play with it, and we didn't feel confident about it, so we didn't really promote it like, hey, we got this great recording, because in truth it didn't sound very good. But in the back of my mind, I always knew that there was some good music in those tapes. We just couldn't get them out. In 2008, I was recording my second solo CD, and there were a couple of songs on there. One that I'd co-written with Cash, and one that he'd written that we'd never recorded with the Kendall Wall Band. The only version of it was a cassette from a rehearsal. Cash had been living in Missouri. He moved back to Missouri quite a long time before that. I think he probably moved back to Missouri in about 95, 96. We kept in touch a lot when he first moved back. He'd come back here and visit every year. Sometimes we'd see each other on his visits, sometimes we wouldn't. And then our contact started to sort of fade until Cash discovered email, and we started communicating more. When we got into making Feels Real Strong, and I had those songs on there, I wanted to let him know, and all of a sudden my emails weren't being responded to. This went on for quite a while. And then in December of 2008, I phoned this phone number that I had because email wasn't working, and a guy answers the phone. Turns out he was Cash's nephew. Cash comes to the phone, and then I find out that he'd been sick, that he'd been diagnosed with brain cancer this previous September. He had 3 tumors, and at the time he seemed very up. He said he was living in assisted living, and he'd been through all of the treatment, and basically said to me, pretty worn down by the treatment, I'm in a wheelchair and I lost all my hair, and I just somehow couldn't picture that. I could only see the cash in my mind, But he said, I'm responding to treatment. He said 2 of the tumors are gone and 1 of them is decreasing in size, so things are looking good. Here's the cell phone number. I keep trying the phone number. I'm getting nothing. I'm leaving messages. In May of 2009, I phoned the only phone number I have, which turns out to be the summer home that nobody goes to until summer. So I said, is Chuck there? And she said, who is this? I said, it's Gary Kendall. I'm a friend of his from Toronto. And she said, well, Gary, sorry to have to tell you this, but Chuck passed away in February. So he'd been dead for like 2 months. And that was pretty hard, and I still am dealing with that.
He wasn't what we would have called a rock drummer or a great drummer, but he was a great blues drummer. And he was more than a great drummer, he was a great musician. He knew the blues, and he could sing the blues, and he had a feeling for it. And so while his drumming might have seemed a little bit loose-limbed to some, hey, where's that tight rock feel, that big feel? He played the blues on the drums, and when you played with him, it was real blues.
Cash Wall was a great guy. He was really had a great sense of humor. He was a great shuffle drummer, one of the best shuffle drummers I ever worked with or listened to.
Well, the one thing I do remember is, I guess I was with Martin O'Quinn at the time. I guess we were there with Morgan as your guests for the afternoon. And at the time, I don't think I could shuffle worth a darn. And Martin kept telling me, he says, watch Cash, watch Cash. Watch how he plays, So I just sit there and watch Cash play, and I thought, it sure looks simple, but how come I'm not getting it, But finally, after time, there is some feel in there. It's kind of like reggae. I still haven't been able to figure that one out, but at least I got the shuffle down, and that was all due to Cash, just watching him and Marty telling me to keep my eyes on him. So.
And Cash was very musical. He could play sax, he could play guitar, he played piano, he sang harmony. He did a lot of things, and I don't think he was ever concerned with being a virtuoso at any of them, but he really tried his hand at everything.
Cash was, I guess looking back, was the main singer. He was kind of like like a Levon Helm kind of character, actually, the singing drummer.
Let me have your loving one more time. I can't get you let down without you on my mind. What you doing, baby?
Cash didn't have any reference point for playing a shuffle other than listening to old blues records. Cash was the first job that Cash had in the Downshot Blues Band was a sax player. And one night the drummer didn't show up.
No way.
So he became the drummer.
No way. I didn't see that.
Yeah, so he had to learn how to play blues from listening to all of the records that Donnie Walsh listened to. So a lot of times I could tell from these things that he was trying to do on the drums that he was trying to play a turnaround that was somebody's mistake.
That's right.
So he would be playing it like the most awkward way of playing it.
That's what I remember about him.
He would be playing it that way because he heard fills like that on these old blues records. And sometimes I'd say, you gotta iron out that part.
Because they're a little rough. They're a little rough coming back into that one, man.
Like Snooky Pryor used to say all the time about Cash, like some of the stuff that he would do on the drums, he'd go, you're getting all tangled up back there.
I wanna break down and cry. What you doing, baby? Let me feel this way. I feel the loving, baby, go night and day.
There was one thing that a family member of Cash, when the last time we spoke, he knew that I'd recorded some of his songs, a co-write between he and I in one of his songs. And he'd made a remark to, I think, one of his nephews that, well, at least now I'll be remembered for my music. And that's always stuck in my head, and I thought, he needs to be remembered more than that.
sweet, baby, you're so fine. And all I want is to make you mine. There's nothing else I wanna do but make you love me like I love you. You know it's right, yes, it's so strong. I've been waiting so long. I'd do anything I have to do to make you love me like I love you. Won't you stay? Little baby of mine. Don't go away. Little baby of mine. Hey, 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 little baby of mine.
You know, I love old projects like this because it's somebody's history. It's I like the way this old music sounds. You know, when it's recorded on tape and it's a bunch of people playing in a room together. So even hearing the source tracks, and sometimes they weren't, were all mixed and the levels were quiet and stuff like that. I could just still hear the essence of it. I could sense that it was going to be a cool project.
When I first got the idea of trying to restore these tapes, there was nobody else that if I didn't know Stu, I wouldn't be able to do this project. Because I knew he could get into all of this stuff, as complicated and as a mess as it might have been.
He asked me what kind of format they were, and it's a matter of figuring out which format. And then they were a standard format from a major studio, but it's from a smaller studio. So the next stage was him finding a place to transfer them.
First, it was very hard to find someone that actually had an 8-track tape machine. They're just not around anymore, you know.
I dusted off the old machine here, and we went from there. I think you had some track sheets. We weren't sure if there were specific settings on the tape machine. We weren't sure if there was noise reduction or not.
Now there's home studios everywhere and smaller studios. Back then there weren't so many smaller studios, but they had 16-track machines, and the studio didn't obviously deal with this style of music all that much. So there's some anomalies in how it was recorded.
You hope that all the drum tracks, for example, if they're on tracks 1 to 8, song to song, they're still on 1 to 8. Because that makes it easy. If they're recorded on the same night, it's the same sound, same levels, you can just go. In this case, it was wildly erratic. There was, song by song was done, a different night perhaps.
As you go to each song, there might be 2 of them with similar sort of way the sounds are, and then on another song, it's completely different microphones, mic'd differently. Sometimes everybody was in the same room, I guess, and the guy didn't pay attention to leakage and whatnot, so we'll be listening to a harp track, and there's all kinds of drum cymbal on that track, so it made it almost unusable on a couple of them, or it was just finding a way to turn down the cymbals on the actual drums and use a bit of that leakage.
This original cassette only has 8 songs on it. When I got into these tapes, I found 2 more great songs.
We can't play you the original version of this because there isn't any, because I discarded this song. Like when we originally did the session, this is one that we just did. There was 2 songs that I found that I had passed on for some reason.
The basic process of mastering is really to put the finishing touches on an album, and Gary and crew have spent many hours rescuing this recording and redoing it. And my work is fairly simple. I just basically sequence up the album and balance it off. And the layman's analogy is they've spent hours and hours and days baking the cake, and I come along and ice it fairly quickly.
happy that we're fixing something we did wrong 25 years ago.
So it was the right time for me to go back and redo the Kendall Raw recording so the Kendall Wall Band can have its well-deserved place in Canadian blues history. And I can't see that happening without a good representation of a recording that's promoted well. It'll be promoted as the lost tapes, the almost lost Kendall Wall recordings. And at the same time, I sort of feel like it's a proper memorial to my friend, and my musical partner for a long time. Cash was a great guy. I did a gig in Missouri recently with Downchild, and he sort of had he had this unique quality. How people some of them it can be like there's nobody else like him. Going down and spending some time in Missouri, I saw all of these other Cash Walls. Like I met all of these really nice people that were like him. Like I guess it's something from where he comes from, like open and friendly and just happy and kind of positive. He was one of those guys, like he was always on the up.
It was a great time for blues and a lot of other reasons, and a lot of the reason the blues was alive in Toronto was because of the Black Swan and Kendall Wall's Saturday matinee.
And nothing, they weren't trying to be spectacular, they weren't trying to be the best this or the best that, but they were all dedicated to the music, and I really enjoyed that camaraderie that the band had with one another, and they made me feel very welcome.
Heart and soul of the Toronto blues community for quite a while, I thought, and definitely you could never talk about the Toronto blues scene history without talking about the Kendall Wall Band.
That was a great little era, and I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 10 years or something like that, but it was a great time.
All of that stuff that I had in my head in those days of how I wanted it to sound, I finally got it out. Took me a long time, but now it's there. So there we have it. This is the Black Swan from top to bottom, the birthplace and home for the Kendall Wall Band. Great period of my life. We had a lot of good times here, and I think it was probably with me. It was kind of a rebirth or a reinventing of my musical career that I almost came here starting from scratch, starting over again, building myself up to where I am today. Back in the Downchild Blues Band, involved in a whole bunch of different things in the music business. I booked the Black Swan for years, and I moved over and booked the Silver Dollar Room for years. I developed a whole part of my career, and really it all started here. Everything that I kind of do now started here. So here we have it, 24 years in the making, the almost lost recordings of the Kendall Wall Band, The Way We Was.
When he's away on his job, now when you glad, you ought to be glad. The doors don't talk, they don't talk. where you've been. But wouldn't you play